Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson today. We're listening to The Killing Season, and this is Danks Maccabee.
The woman whose disappearance nearly 5 years ago led to the Gilgo Beach murder probe finally laid to rest today. Suffolk County Police Department says they will not comment on the case unless they have new information.
I'm John Ray. I'm Shannon's advocate and protector. You came to this place at this moment in Shannon's yet unfinished calamity. First, to comfort her family, especially her poor, sad, broken mother. We have strong evidence. The results will soon be known. So pay attention. I dare you to speak to Shannon. You're a murderer. Murderer, I hope you are listening. Murderer, murderer, I hope you are listening.
Delving into the case of the Long Island serial killer, Rachel and I have come to learn there are no easy answers.
We believe it was exposure to the elements. Didn't sound like anybody was trying to kill her.
Do you believe that?
Tina's death was not an accident.
And the truth is sometimes just as tragic as the crime itself.
He said she's staying in a warehouse, I believe. I do believe it was him I talked to.
Every lead we've uncovered only seems to take us further down the rabbit hole.
Where should we go?
Same way he finds us, on that page.
It is a journey far darker than we could ever have imagined.
We have information as to whom we believe this individual is.
But of all the mysteries we've encountered so far, none has been more consequential, and to some coincidental, than the disappearance of Shannon Gilbert from Oak Beach.
Gilbert's decomposed body finally turned up a year to the day after the first bodies did, but still authorities insisted she was not a victim of murder.
After all, it was the search for Shannon that led to the discovery of 10 victims along Ocean Parkway, before her body was found in a marsh just a half mile from where she disappeared. Did Shannon die accidentally, as the police contend, or was she murdered? And if she was it at the hands of Lisk? And maybe the most pressing question, could her death somehow hold the key to unlocking this case?
Shannon Gilbert disappears and it isn't properly investigated for months, not until the other bodies arrive. So what happens next? The community becomes the focal point of intense speculation. People start speculating that this is a huge conspiracy that the town is covering up for a neighbor. This conspiracy concerns a doctor named Peter Hackett.
The former head of Suffolk County's emergency medical services, Dr. Peter Hackett lived in the same Oak Beach community as Joseph Brewer, the client who hired Shannon that fateful night.
Did you see Shannon Gilbert on that night?
Wait, she was missing.
She was missing.
Dr. Hackett would quickly find himself in the center of a media maelstrom because of a bizarre phone call he'd made to Shannon's mother, Mary Gilbert, just days after the disappearance.
What kinds of questions did the police ask you?
Try that again.
Mr. Hacker called me and said that he ran a halfway house for women, total kids who lived off the street, and asked me if I heard from Shannon. Is Shannon home? Have I seen her? I knew something was wrong.
Hackett told Murray that Shannon was in his home and that he medicated Shannon and that she left with her driver. He was upset because he was worried that Shannon had not returned.
But he refuted saying this.
We have solid evidence that he did indeed make those calls and say those things.
Despite Hackett's denials, John Ray has since filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the doctor on behalf of Shannon's estate.
It's enough, certainly, to trigger the police to spend a little more time on this case investigating Dr. Hackett and his circumstances. But they haven't done that. They have not taken a written statement from Hackett, and in short, they've done none of the normal things that you would do when you have a suspect.
Dr. Hackett, labeled a storyteller and over-elaborator by neighbors, would later admit to calling Mary out of concern, but never to seeing Shannon that night. But equally intriguing were the rumors surrounding the secretive community of Oak Beach. In fact, the only residents willing to speak to us were Joe Scalise and his son, Joe Jr.
Oak Beach is as isolated as you want it to be. Behind that gate is basically like its own little country.
Both men have been vocal about the case, and even predicted a year before Shannon was found that her body would be located in a nearby marsh.
This is Joe Brewer's house. Supposedly, there was a bunch of guys who liked to party here, and the reason why they liked it was it was an isolated spot where they could basically do whatever they wanted with these girls.
There was something going on that night, no doubt about it. Word around the community is drugs, women, and many of our community residents would show up.
And what did take place that night?
Shannon Gilbert was murdered. This is the home of Peter Hackett.
Right here. Now, there's people on the deck, so keep going.
The Suffolk County Police Department cleared Peter Hackett of any wrongdoing or said he was not a person of interest.
Well, he also refused to take a polygraph test. Peter is also connected to some politicians and some high-ranking Suffolk County police. Slow down, Joe.
Hey,
It's a documentary.
I'm sure you're filming houses and stuff. You filming me right now?
You see the kind of people that live here.
During our investigation, we also came across numerous instances of rampant speculation about Hackett online.
Here's a hint, something interesting was found in the doctor's backyard.
Doctor had access to rules of burlap. One of the most salacious detractors was a user going by the handle FlukeU. This is from FlukeU. Do you seriously think Peter Hackett is not on this site posing and trying to run interference? Joe Jr., your web handle, are you FlukeU?
I don't think we want to comment on that now.
Are you FlukeU?
Do I have to answer the question? Why not figure out what's going on with Shannon and what happened the night on May 1st rather than who Fluke is? What does that matter?
Are the Scalise shedding light on a community-wide conspiracy? Or are they part of a conspiracy devoted to demonizing Hackett? And then there's John Ray, who has now agreed to disclose to us new information that he believes will shed light on what really happened to Shannon that night.
I believe that the closest thing I have to the smoking gun is a statement from Bruce Anderson, a neighbor. Hackett told Bruce Anderson that Hackett had seen Shannon the morning that she disappeared. Shannon had come into his home, he had treated her, medicated her, and that she left his home in a confused state of mind.
Hackett continues to deny these claims and has since left Oak Beach, which is why Rachel and I are now driving across the island to to hopefully get his side of the story.
Which one is it? Right there? Someone's home. Someone's definitely home.
I mean, just to throw it out there, you're not worried at all about in front of this guy.
Listen, like if he invites us in, you're gonna have to go in. Are you cool with that? Hi, how are you? Dr. Peter Hackett.
Who's asking?
My name's Josh Zeman. This is Rachel Mills. We're from a production company. You want to speak in for a quick second?
I don't think so. We're in a lawsuit. At this point in time, since Mrs. Gilbert is suing us, we have no comment.
Okay. But I'm just trying to get a very legitimate,
I get it. Mr. Well,
Well, I didn't think he's home right now, too. She said he was asking.
Yeah, he must be there.
While it's frustrating not hearing Hackett's side of the story, even if he was home, it's hard to say what Josh and I would have learned, seeing how he's reacted to such questioning in the past.
You had nothing to do with Shannon Gilbert's death?
That's correct.
What about all the other girls? What was that?
My defibrillator. Sons of bitches. What channel are you from?
While Hackett's behavior is suspect,
Guys, caused me to have a defibrillation. Just take pictures of these clowns, would you?
it was hard for Josh and I to picture him as anything more than a man who needed to insert himself in other people's drama in order to create his own.
Please, let me call a doctor. Please.
I am a doctor.
We can only hope that at some point, we'll learn either the true extent of Hackett's involvement or of his total vindication. Yet as tragic as Shannon's death is, there was still the overwhelming horror of 10 bodies, bringing us back to our hunt for Lisk and to our post on Backpage, which has led to numerous texts and calls, including one cryptic message that caught our attention. I heard who the Lisk is/was, and it kind of makes sense that he hasn't killed in quite a while. Interesting.
We should call him.
Call him?
Hey, how you doing? We're the filmmakers who are doing the Long Island serial killer documentary.
You saw our post on Backpage.
yes. I had heard that the gentleman that owned Atlantis Marine in Riverhead, he was a suspect, and that's when he killed himself.
And how did you hear that?
Well, I worked with the police department, and I had heard that that's who the DA's office was questioning and everything else, and, with number one suspect.
The man that Cumler was talking about was James Bissett, a wealthy landscaper and aquarium enthusiast.
Right here.
We'd heard rumors surrounding Bissett before, but never from someone connected to law enforcement, leading us to take a closer look. December 14th. In an eerie coincidence, Bissett committed suicide just one day after Shannon's body was discovered. And what's more, he also owned a nursery that allegedly was one of the only places on the island that sold burlap sacks, which was wrapped around 4 of the victims. Something kind of viable. Which has led Josh and I to drive out to Long Island to see just how difficult it is to find burlap sacks.
Hi, how are you? Do you guys sell burlap sacks?
Like a potato sack.
No, I don't.
I don't want to say anything because it's just speculation. But listen, something happened when he was going to be exposed. I think that's why he committed suicide.
Finally, our search has brought us here, to the nursery owned by the Bissett family. Josh, is this a sack?
Yeah. You think something like this would be big enough?
It's not out of the question. Bissett's easy access to burlap and his mysterious suicide made the story difficult to ignore. And these facts didn't escape the attention of the online community.
What's interesting is this 2,868 comments.
Jesus.
Jimmy was a womanizer and a cocaine addict, an alcoholic, and his cell phone with these numbers in it.
I have heard they found an underground kill room.
His family's been trying to keep it hush-hush. Makes sense why he killed himself.
Jimmy was good people. Watch your disrespectful talk.
All you moronic scumbags post negative things about such a great person should be ashamed of yourselves. I know he will be truly missed. It's all just rumors. Trying to make sense of all these comments, we reached out to Ellen Bissett, the family spokesperson, to get her perspective.
Are you aware of the internet hoax?
The internet hoax?
Yes. Basically went viral.
Right, 2,800 comments about this?
Obviously, it's extremely upsetting for the family.
Any reason why it started?
It had all the makings of a great sensationalized story with money, power, intrigue, sex, and murder. Is it more completely false?
Could the answer be so simple, a hoax? Or was this further proof of an alleged cover-up? In the echo chamber of the internet, it was surprisingly easy to see how the facts could fit either narrative.
There's so many theories, and this theory about Bissett went like wildfire over the internet. There's no evidence whatsoever connecting Bissett to Shannon or any of these other women. None.
The Suffolk PD even issued a rare press release, warning people not to believe the internet rumors. But since it didn't mention Bissett by name, it only fueled further speculation of a cover-up. We shouldn't be surprised.
With a lack of answers, especially after a case that's been going on for 5 years, people create narratives to fulfill those storylines.
Human nature is what it is. Whether guilty or innocent, it didn't matter. Bissett would forever be tied to the Long Island serial killer. It was a lack of suspects or any new information, and our need to speculate that convicted him, turning fiction into fact and fear into hate.
I hope he was the one that did it, and we can stop thinking about it. If it's not him, that means this psycho is still out there, probably eyeing Backpage for his next victim right now.
The List case has provided us with countless questions. Why were so many of the missing ignored? How can so many still be unidentified 5 years later? And most importantly, who is responsible? The answers provided by police have only led to more questions, such as in the case of Shannon Gilbert. Despite claims that her death was accidental, the fact that she was found so close to the other bodies have left many convinced she was a victim of Lisk.
Shannon Gilbert. She fits the same profile as all the other girls. She's an escort service girl. She is going out to do a trick, and she doesn't come back. How can you separate Shannon Gilbert from those other victims? You can't.
The way she operated, the MO was completely different. She had a driver. Brewer had the driver bring Shannon to his house with these young women. There was no driver. They were lured into some location. We still believe, and we hold to it, that she succumbed to the elements.
Just doesn't make sense that she would run naked through a marsh and then die if there wasn't somebody out there who was also involved in her death. I mean, there are a lot of different ways you can play out, but the police theory is probably the least likely of any of those.
It's the enduring mystery of Shannon's death and our own need for answers that has led Josh and I back to Oak Beach to retrace her final steps. This is actually actually the only exit of the whole community. You know, had she just made a left and kept running down this way, she most likely would have run into someone.
Where'd she run instead?
She ran this way.
Down there. Maybe she figures that this is the closest way to the highway. You can kind of hear the cars.
Yeah.
And so she runs into here, into the marsh. Hello? Anybody home? Grace?
Yeah.
Let's try and walk it.
Right, how far off?
I think right over there.
Less than 500 yards from where we entered, police found the trail of Shannon's purse, shoes, and her torn pants. She lost all her possessions. She lost her pants, somehow, either taking them off or having to pull them off because they got wet.
This is really what it must have been like.
I mean, she's walking barefoot, not gloves. She must have been cut up.
Well,
Yes, it's bad. I can't even see where you are right now.
guys? Except far away she was from the house.
Jeez.
It's like a quarter mile of a huge push.
If she was brought in here, how would that person have done it? There's no way. Standing out here, we were confident Shannon's body hadn't been staged, as the Go-Go Beach 4 had been. But still, could someone have had a hand in her death? Had she been chased, as the 911 call insinuated? Or had she been given drugs that led to the episode police suggested?
So sad.
What makes me sad is that, look, it takes us so much to get through here. No one comes.
I believe that her death was not in vain because she led to the discovery of 10 other individuals.
Maybe one day we will solve the mystery of what exactly happened to Shannon.
Fair.
But will that answer involve Lisk? In our opinion, probably not. Yet the fact that Shannon led to the discovery of 10 victims has since become one of the most bizarre coincidences in all of true crime, tainting the entire Lisk case and making almost any answer impossible to accept. But there are questions that can be answered and need to be answered for the sake of the victims, their families, and the public at large.
After months of investigating the Long Island serial killer case, trying to learn more about victims like Asian male, or eliminating false leads like Joe Foti, Rachel and I decided to turn to the web sleuth community
30 seconds.
for help.
30 seconds, guys.
Perhaps by crowdsourcing the information we've already uncovered, we can move this investigation forward.
Welcome both of you to True Crime Radio.
We thought, well, let's just go to you guys and see what you do best.
One way to possibly find out who the perpetrator of these crimes is to figure out who more of these victims are, to identify more of these victims. We're talking about the mother and toddler, Asian male, Fire Island Jane Doe, all of these unidentified people we've investigated.
The cops need help. You need to reach out to the public. You need to reach out to the web sleuths.
Field Notes, are you there, my dear?
I am. One of the victims, the mother of the toddler, has yet, after all this time, to make it into any kind of database. It's troubling because this is such a complicated case.
As Field Notes tells us, inexplicably, Jane Doe number 3, the mother of the toddler, isn't entered in any public database, making it that much harder for web sleuths to help identify her.
There just has to be at least an accurate accounting of these victims.
We also had questions about the mysterious phone call received by a close friend of Maureen Brainerd Barnes.
He said that she's staying in a warehouse in Queens.
He used the word whorehouse. That's the same terminology that killer used when he called Melissa's little sister.
Right. So that's not the only mention of Queens. We were speaking to Khalil. He believed that Jessica Taylor had been picked up from Queens Plaza.
Really? That's pretty significant. Now that you said that, it would be pretty easy to go back and find where the brothels in Queens are.
And finally, the mystery that divided everyone. What really happened to Shannon Gilbert? Which is why we've turned to Peter Brent. So do you believe that Hackett is connected?
No way. Dr. Hackett has his own personality case, but none of it points to serial killer.
Well, then how did Shannon end up being in that slum?
When people freeze to death, then basically the whole body eating system misfires, and the brain has something to feel, it feels hot, and people start to undress.
Looking into Peter's hypothermia theory, it made sense. Because of the wind, Oak Beach could be brutally cold, even in summer.
She had a history of drugs. A lot of them. Trace and such effects is quite common with this paradoxic undressing.
Speaking to web sleuthers and sharing these new insights, we can only hope that a new lead would emerge, bringing us all one step closer to catching the Long Island serial killer. But there was another victim we had yet to discuss. One who was also connected to Long Island, but in a different way. Her name was Kim Raffo. And like Shannon Gilbert, the GB4, and the other victims, she too was a sex worker at the time of her death. But she too was much more than that. Kim was a loving wife and a mother of two, until money troubles, an affair, and eventually drugs led her to a life on the streets of Atlantic City.
She was just a lost person in Atlantic City. And prior to that, she was one of the most wonderful moms and really an inspiration to everybody around her.
Yet despite the dark hold of addiction, Kim still yearned for the way it once was, for the simple pleasures of a family.
Kim wanted out of Atlantic City. She was like, please take me out of here. And I was like, let's get your stuff on board and let's go.
Hugh took Kim to a hotel in Jericho, Long Island, with the hopes of rebuilding their life together.
After 3-4 weeks straight, she started gaining her weight back and started looking healthy again. She was coming back into her own.
Kim was especially hopeful about reconnecting with her two children, who were staying with a foster mother.
We called up the foster mom to find out how the kids are. It's like, no, I'm sorry, but the kids just don't wish to see you right now or speak to you. And she's like, oh my God, my kids don't love me anymore. And I knew that I lost her at that point. Before I knew it, she took off to Atlantic City.
Hello, police department, help you? Yeah, me and my friend were taking a walk down the path, and I was down the water, and there's a dead woman down there.
Just 3 weeks after leaving Long Island, Kim Raffo was found floating in a drainage ditch, her head turned east, toward the broken promises of Atlantic City. However, Kim was only one of 4 women found in that watery grave. 4 women who bore eerie similarities to Gilgo Beach 4.
Hello, police department, help you? Yeah, me and my friend were taking a walk down the path, and there's a dead woman down there.
The woman the caller was talking about was Kim Raffo, a 35-year-old mother of 2 who tragically found herself on the streets of Atlantic City. But Kim wasn't the only horror police discovered in that watery grave.
4 women, their bodies dumped in a muddy drainage ditch behind a strip of seedy motels.
They were all barefoot, facing down, with their heads pointed towards Atlantic City casinos.
Body number 1, located in the drainage ditch, face down.
Her names were Kim Raffo, Tracy Ann Roberts, Barbara Braver, and Molly Dilts. And the parallels to Long Island and the Gilgo Beach Four were ominous. In both cases, we were dealing with four women, all Caucasian, all neatly laid out in a single row, all spaced close to one another, and all found in short proximity to water. But there was also Kim's own connection to Long Island. Just weeks before her murder, she'd been living in a hotel only 18 miles from Gilgo Beach. It was an eerie connection that had been brought up before.
You've been revisiting any possible link between these bodies and the four Atlantic City prostitutes found dead in 2006?
Our homicide squad is in contact with the Atlantic City PD. That is certainly part of the investigation.
Was it possible that Lisk had begun his reign of terror 2 years before Gilgo Beach and just a few hours south, beneath the bright lights of Atlantic City? Only 120 miles connect Long Island to Atlantic City. On a good day, you can make it in 2.5 hours. Today, Rachel and I were making the same journey Kim Raffo did. But we're here to see if Lisk made the same trip too. All four victims have been found behind the Golden Key Motel. Barbara and Molly were too decomposed to determine a cause of death. But Tracy had been asphyxiated, and Kim strangled, just like the G before. But these women shared another connection with those along Ocean Parkway. In their deaths, they'd forever be defined as sex workers. And none more so than Kim Raffo.
Kim Raffo left their home chasing a wild life driven by crack cocaine. And Kim eventually ended up walking the hard luck streets of Atlantic City, selling sex to support her habit.
Immediately, Kim was branded as a prostitute, streetwalker, or drug addict, which really was just her life in the past year. But I didn't want the world to know her as that. That was so far from her actual character.
Seeing her in happier times, it's hard to believe how far Kim Raffo had fallen.
The press had pushed Kim's story as the ultimate fall from grace. A cautionary tale of addiction and sex work that caused her death. But why were we blaming the victims and not the real culprit? And why was the press not covering the much bigger story?
I've been writing about this since 1990 and no one's paying any attention. No one cares about the prostitutes that are disappearing. In the 1970s, 16% of female victims of serial killers were prostitutes. By the decade 2000 to 2009, 70% of female victims of serial killers were prostitutes. It's a huge increase, one that virtually no one talked about.
It seems in the digital age, our lives have become infinitely more trackable. To get away with murder, a serial killer must now seek out those victims who are under the radar, namely sex workers, who spend their days trying to evade police. With burner phones, cash transactions, and multiple identities, sex workers now more than ever have become the perfect victim.
A professor once said to me, lions look for deer near the watering hole. For serial killers, watering holes are where people will go with strangers and they're dark and no one's watching.
This area of Atlantic City is called the Track, the main drag for prostitution.
Okay, but before we do the interview, I want the money, so, okay. Yeah. You don't know whose car you're jumping into, so you really don't know if that guy's a killer, a rapist, a murderer.
How do you protect yourself?
I don't, I just go with it.
Kim Raffo, you knew her?
No, I know her very well. I had got raped, and I didn't tell nobody for a long time. She helped me through that a lot.
Have you been to the Golden Key Motel?
A friend of mine actually stayed in that same room before.
Which room?
The room where they all got killed.
Room 101?
Yes, they were all down there in that corner room there. There's a lot of rumors going around saying he's in New York City.
While the fear over this killer, dubbed the Eastbound Strangler, looms large, his elusiveness has turned him into a boogeyman. Yet the growing threat of violence against these women is all too real. But the track isn't the only watering hole. There's also Black Horse Pike, or the Pike, as locals call it, a dangerous alleyway where crime festers, feeding upon drugs, poverty, and despair. The Golden Key is just one of a number of motels along the Pike, and many believe the murders were committed in these rooms. For years, officials have been trying to shut down these motels. But then, like some modern-day Sodom and Gomorrah, a great flood would wipe away the sins for them.
There's no boardwalk left. The boardwalk is gone.
When Hurricane Sandy flooded many of the motels in 2012, officials took it as a sign to start afresh. Now, in the coming days, the Golden Key is scheduled to be demolished. And along with it, a potential crime scene, and possibly the only clues we'll ever have to solve this case. Rachel and I are in Atlantic City after discovering 4 murders that bore an eerie resemblance to those of Lisk, which has now led us to seek out local law enforcement, not just for answers in a possible connection to Gilgo Beach, but to these unsolved murders as well.
Kim, Tracy, Molly, Barbara were discovered off the Black Horse Pike. The most obvious question is, how close are we to finding a killer? This is back in 2006. The only person who can answer that question is Atlantic County Prosecutor Blitz. His office has remained silent on almost everything.
Do you think you have a serial killer? So far, the post-mortem examination is only been completed on a single one, which indicates ligature strangulation. So I have 1 homicide. The other 3 are pending completion. I'll have an answer for that toward the end of the interview.
After his one and only press conference, Blitz would remain tight-lipped until his retirement a year later. 2 other prosecutors have held this post since then, and now Rachel and I were reaching out to the 3rd, Jim McLean, hoping after 10 years things have changed. Dear Mr. Zeman, I spoke to Prosecutor McLean about your request. He respectfully declines. He appreciates any information and leads that the public can provide.
I think they were maybe hoping it just goes away.
Although many of the victims worked around the casinos, their bodies were found in Egg Harbor, just 14 miles away. Egg Harbor is covered by a different police department than AC. It's still overseen by the same prosecutor's office. Yet neither would speak to us, which has now led us to the only officer who would.
I was a captain and vice on Atlantic City Police Department. I got the call at home from my boss, the deputy chief. He said, Hutchins, they found some girls in West Atlantic City. They think they're probably hookers, so you're probably going to get a call. Okay, chief. I never got the call. So we never got contact to help identify them until like 3 days later. The then prosecutor, Jeff Blitz, ordered us not to talk to the media about anything. So we didn't. They didn't ask me for manpower, which we could have gave them a lot. If they would have had that manpower, would there be a difference now? I don't know. But we'll never know because that didn't happen.
With so few in law enforcement willing to speak to us publicly, we've been forced to try another angle. One that begins with the police's main person of interest at the time, a former handyman at the Golden Key, named Terry Olson. In 2006, Olson's girlfriend called police after suspecting him of the murders. Upon searching his home, a hidden camera was found containing naked pictures of his girlfriend's teenage daughter. Although police found no evidence of the murders, Olson served 7 months for the illegal videotaping.
All right, very good. Okay, so we'll meet you at your office at 5:30.
After weeks of trying, Olson has finally agreed to drive us to the Golden Key for an interview.
Well, I mean, another thing is we're not familiar with the Golden Key. Terry is. We'll be in unfamiliar territory.
Things happen quickly. That's the problem.
So you guys okay with not having security around?
You know, if anything happens, the three of us will be together, so we should be okay there. Right? By the way, what type of vehicle does he have? No idea.
Storm's coming. I think it's done.
Yeah. All right. We'll be back. Okay. So he's not very comfortable with three people being in a car with him. So I think it's just better if Rachel and I just go with him for the moment. Yeah, it's great.
Next time on The Killing Season.
Next Terry Olson.
You know, there are other people who said you could have done it. I'd rather not get into that.
There's a reason the head's faced east.
Have you ever seen this movie before? I met up with some John. He plain outright told me he killed 2 people.
I'm not really at liberty to discuss the line to slow instead of on.
A serial killer is on the loose in the Daytona area.
We're not dealing with Atlantic City like streetwalkers.
Yeah.
We have a naked female in a field with a gunshot wound to the face. The son of a bitch is back. Excuse me. You know, woman named Melissa Bishop? She live around here?
Melissa Bishop?
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
You know a woman named Melissa Bishop? Do you know this girl?
Oh, no.
I'm looking for someone named Melissa Bishop.
That's great.
School's girl. Oh, yeah? Melissa?
You know this guy?
I'm scared to death of that man. That's why I'm down to Jersey. Terry Olson admitted he killed some people in Red Bank when I tried to leave, he tried to attack me, and I back at home.
You believe he killed those 4 women?
I believe he did, yes. I believe that man's capable of anything.
investigation of the 10 bodies found along Ocean Parkway, which after 5 years still remains unsolved. Rachel and I were now focusing our attention on the 4 victims of Lisk, known as the Gilgo Beach Four.
This is collection behavior. This guy is a collector.
Because of their eerie similarities to another set of unsolved murders of 4 women.
You revisiting any possible link between these bodies and the 4 Atlantic City prostitutes found dead in 2006?
Our homicide squad is in contact with the Atlantic City PD. That is certainly part of the investigation.
Which has now brought us here, to Atlantic City, and to the man who was at one time a person of interest in these murders. His name is Terry Olson. And he's taking us back to the scene of the crime, the Golden Key Motel, where Terry was once a handyman and where these bodies were found.
When's the last time you were back to the Golden Key?
When all this stuff happened.
There's a lot of those nice hotels over there, though, right?
Hotel.
So they're ripping this place down. What would you want to see built here?
Probably a parking lot.
Was that your room?
That's the room I stayed in.
Why do you think that's here?
It looks fresh. There used to be prostitutes walking through. They called me and asked me to kick them out. Only thing I remember is being home and my ex-girlfriend saying, "Hey, Gold Key's on television."
But somehow your name got brought up.
My ex-girlfriend called him up and said, my husband did it.
Did you spend time in jail and all that during that time?
Yes, not for this, for a different matter.
And what was the nature of that matter?
I'd rather not get into that.
There are other people who said that you could have done it, right? Melissa Bishop, who's she?
I met her through here.
Mm-hmm. And what did she say?
She never said I could have done it.
Didn't she say that she had sex with you? You tried to strangle her?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know. I don't remember. It's been that long ago, but I don't think so.
And what about the room where it happened? Room 101?
They searched this room.
So, what did you hear about this room?
I know they searched it because it had a back door to the back alley.
Where's that?
Right here?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. She was found literally right here. I mean, have you ever walked down here before? No. You've never been back,
Never.
While Terry has never been charged with the murders, many still point the finger at him. Yet Terry continues to maintain his innocence.
You even gave them DNA?
I volunteered DNA.
And what was the result of that DNA test?
I still haven't gotten the results.
They haven't given you the results. Why would they not?
Because same reason they didn't give me my stuff back. My life's in shambles because of all this. It didn't have anything to do with whoever killed these poor women. It didn't have anything to do with the women. It had to do with Atlantic City.
So, how bad did it get?
They accuse me of killing people. How much worse can it get? I would like to clear my name, but I don't know if it'll ever happen. Until Atlantic City says, no, he had nothing to do with it, everybody's going to have that shred of doubt in their head.
For whatever parts of Terry's story seemed questionable, there was a side to him that felt honest. And considering he was never charged with the murders, maybe he really was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Do you think this will ever go away?
Probably not. Not until they find out whoever did this, and with the way they did everything, I don't think they'll ever find it.
You don't think they'll ever solve the case?
If the media and police were guilty of dragging Terry through the mud, then we were as well. We pushed Olson's narrative as far as it would go. Maybe we wanted it to be true, so that we could finally solve this mystery. Unfortunately, for so many of us, allegation is as good as truth, especially in a town that banks on illusion. Rachel and I were in Atlantic City, looking for a link between the murders of 4 women here and the Gilgo Beach 4. Of course, there were the obvious connections: the number of victims, the graveyard staging, the sex work. But often lost was the fact that these women were daughters. They were sisters. And in the case of Atlantic City, they were all mothers. Kim Rappo had 2 children. Barbara Brader was the mother to a 9-year-old. Tracy Ann Roberts' daughter was just 5. And the youngest victim, Molly Diltz, had a 1-year-old son, likely too young to even remember his mother. While understandably, most of the victims' families didn't want to drudge up the past, Molly's father, Werner Diltz, was willing to speak with us.
Hey, Werner, I just need your help to make sure that this case doesn't go away.
Poor girl. And you finally leave. That's crazy. But they had a lot of news that bodies were found. My daughter-in-law said, that sounds like Molly. We called down there and told them where they could find her fingerprint. Lo and behold, it turned out it was her. I mean, she did more investigating than what they did. I don't think there's any good forensic work at all in this case. I got her little voice sitting in front of you. Evidence there, everything.
That's Molly's son?
Yeah.
What's his
name? His son found out who killed your mom. Say hi.
What's your name?
What's your name?
Jeremiah. That's a cool name.
My name's Josh.
I'm Rachel.
Hi, Jeremiah.
And he says to me who killed his mom. I told him it's a bad man. So no one else can tell. You're a professional. I'm just a guy who can't be rushed. I mean, you're the one who should devote your time to find out why the police baffled that case.
Werner was right. Somebody needed to ask the question about why this case didn't get solved. The only problem being the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office wasn't talking. In fact, Prosecutor Blitz would give just one press conference for the entire duration of the investigation.
But I want to make it perfectly clear for those folks that know me. I'm inclined only to indicate what we know.
While managing speculation in a serial killer case can be overwhelming, Blitz's silence went beyond controlling a news-hungry press. It took officials over 7 years to even acknowledge there was a serial killer in their midst. So why have prosecutors remained so tight-lipped for so long? And how could they ever expect to solve this case if they refused to talk about it? Maybe to find the real answer, we had to look no further than the city itself.
All 4 of those women who were murdered, right? All of their stories are about running away from something and coming to a place where they hoped and thought they can reinvent themselves. You can escape your past here.
women didn't foresee was that this house of cards would eventually collapse.
Not long after the 4 women were murdered, the recession hit, and it just went sour quickly. Since 2006, the Trump Plaza closed, the Claridge is closed, the Sands is closed, the Showboat is closed, and the Rebel is closed. Oh, and the Hilton is closed. Atlantic City took such a big hit, and the city's left this huge hole in the middle of it.
And that hole has only grown bigger. As of 2016, Atlantic City teeters on the edge of bankruptcy. But what about back in 2006, when the casinos grossed just over $5 billion? At the time, the first regional gambling den had just opened in Pennsylvania, and a dark cloud of the recession was forming on the horizon. Maybe the last thing officials wanted to publicly admit was that the city, once sold sanctioned sin, one whose lifeblood was tourism, was now home to a serial killer and 4 dead sex workers. With officials hesitant to release information about the killer, the most credible profile ever made public came from Stalk, a group of law enforcement and profilers headed by an addiction specialist named John Kelly.
This guy has the kind of rage against these girls that he would put them in a sewer, that they're nothing more to him than trash.
Stalk was quick to dub this killer the Eastbound Strangler, since all the women were found with their heads facing east.
That led us to believe that he wanted them positioned the way he positioned them in that ditch so he could come and relive the murder and refantasize the conquest and the dominance that he had over them. We also believed right off the hop that it was a foot fetish because they had no shoes, no socks, but had their other clothing.
If it's true the Eastbound Strangler did have a foot fetish, and we've heard about a sex worker who believes she knows who it may be.
Excuse me. Are you by any chance Denise Hill? Hi, how are you?
Hey, Rachel, we're looking for you.
Just days before the bodies were found behind the Golden Key, Denise met a client she would never forget.
I met up with somebody, a John, on the street, and he wound up buying me a hot dog, a calling card, and gave me some crack. He plain outright told me he killed some people, and he talked about my shoes when I met him. He likes my shoes. I gave him a pair of shoes like mine, you know. He put his hands on me, acted like he was going to choke me, but he didn't do it. But I just stayed stiff, you know. But he didn't continue it, you know. He was just trying to show me a little fear or something.
In 2007, on an episode of 48 Hours, Denise was paired with a sketch artist to create this picture of the man she met that night.
I mean, I know I'm right. I don't know how to tell you anymore. I know I'm right. He did it.
But what Denise didn't know back then was that one day she would hold the clue that would reveal this man's identity.
While searching for answers in the unsolved murders of 4 women here in Atlantic City, Josh and I have come across a sex worker named Denise Hill, who's convinced she met the killer the day before the bodies were found.
He plain outright told me he killed some people.
Months later, Denise received a mysterious letter from this same man, which she gave to a lawyer named James Leonard.
The card is addressed to Denise Hill. Instead of having a name, the return address is Riverman. I immediately went to Google. I found Riverman as like a moniker for the Green River Killer.
Leonard believes Denise's attacker chose the name Riverman as an homage to Gary Ridgway, aka the Green River Killer, one of the most notorious killers of sex workers in America.
Sitting here, I got the chills. I said to Denise Hill, I need that card. I put it in a bag, and I called the Atlanta County Prosecutor's Office. I'll never forget. The investigator came back and said, "Where is it?" And I handed him the bag. He said, "Thank you," and just left. No small talk. Didn't want to hear the story.
And you went forward to the police and told them about him.
They questioned me, but I was a crackhead and a prostitute. My credibility wasn't any good. That's what I heard.
Looking into Denise's story, we were able to confirm Riverman's identity with the help of this man, Peter Gillespie, a former producer for America's Most Wanted. In 2008, Riverman came back to Atlantic City, and Peter took his picture, which legally we can't fully reveal.
I wrote up a document, gave it to the detectives who were working the case, sent it along, crickets, nothing. And when I finally get one conversation that was very, very brief and basically told me, get your nose out of this. 16 years working on America's Most Wanted. I've never had to deal with what I had to deal with the Atlanta County Prosecutor's Office.
We also can't tell you Riverman's real name. However, after Atlantic City, his arrest record places him in California, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and Florida. His last known address is Alabama. After that, his trail goes cold, which means all we can do is wait till he resurfaces. We assume the police have looked into Riverman, though we wonder to what extent. Yet while some believe the Eastbound Strangler has moved on, others believe he never left, and in fact, may have struck again.
Okay, a source tells NBC 10 that the woman was nude and appeared to be beaten and strangled, but as of right now, there is no official cause of death and no arrests.
On February 14th, 2014, Valentine's Day, 25-year-old Joyce Vanderhoff was found alongside a desolate road, 15 miles from the Golden Key. To this day, Joyce's murder remains unsolved, and the Atlantic City Prosecutor's Office refuses to release details about her death, frustrating many, most of all, her family.
We were not even allowed to see the autopsy report. And that is one of my main heartbreaks, because they're very afraid that if they release any information to us, that we might spill it out to the media. It was somebody from the prosecutor's office who said that I was naive. I said, no, I'm not naive. I know exactly what my granddaughter was up to. She was living in the budget hotel on the Black Horse Pike, which is across from the Golden Key. There was a lot of prostitution going on there. There were a lot of drug exchanges going on there.
Though it's hard to say if Joyce's death is connected to the Eastbound Strangler, some web sleuthers have hypothesized a link. One user, named Cynical1, agreed to speak with us, under the condition we conceal his identity.
Atlantic City right now is engaged in changing their image once more to be now a family-friendly environment. And this would not be something that they would really want to have publicized. And I have to believe that he's back killing.
I mean, how much time have you spent looking at this case?
Hundreds of hours on this particular case. And I'm not really at liberty to discuss why my interest level is so high. Okay, but I felt that I did have an obligation to the families.
You're not at liberty to say why what your interest was in the case?
Yeah, I mean, everybody has their own take on why they're on websites. Okay, it's not something that I just do as a hobby.
Can you tell us what your job is?
I prefer not to right now.
Okay.
Is there anything that you want to task us with?
Yeah, I could email you a location that I would say take a good look at as like an interim point between where the women were picked up and where they were found. Say a place where you park the car, kill a woman in.
Yeah.
4 times. Some place where the streams in Atlantic City wouldn't be heard. It's a place that I've been.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, thanks very much. We look forward to speaking with you again.
Okay. Thank you.
What do you think he does that he can't say?
I don't know. There's a personal interest in the case. Do you think you knew one of them? While we continued to speculate as to what Cynical's connection could be, he soon followed up with an email that only increased our unease. I'd like to ask you, Rachel, for your personal opinion on a location inside Atlantic City that I happen to believe is a killing site. I'm asking you, Rachel, to personally go there because as a female, you may be better able to identify with the victims and absorb the vibe of this particular location. Going straight, then you're going to turn a slight right onto Absent Convent Boulevard, 22 miles.
I wonder how he came upon this place.
He said he's been there before. They took a woman there. So we take a right. Heading to the side, we couldn't help but wonder, why was Cynical One so invested? And why so secretive? Was he ex-law enforcement? A friend to one of the victims? Or something else? According to the map, it dead ends. Dear Rachel, I've come to believe in the following theory. In 2006, the killer picks up his victims in a car from an area near the boardwalk. Drugs of choice are procured and they travel to the location. The killer strikes by strangling her and then puts her body in the trunk of the car. A pattern that could only be established by a local who has intimate knowledge of all three important areas. But the final pattern, the most important one, the location where 4 victims were actually killed, remains the ultimate mystery. So Rachel, I ask that you personally visit the location I've pinpointed. Discover the pattern, and this case might stand a chance of actually being solved. Probably wouldn't think it was too unusual to have a car date back here, either. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
I'd still feel a little bit safe. I can see lights, I can see passing cars. It's not too far from my comfort zone.
While it seemed possible this was the kill site, 10 years later, how can we know for sure? Yet, interestingly enough, a pattern did emerge.
It's strange, it looks a little bit, even a lot like Long Island. Same reeds, same desolate area, same slightly by the highway, slightly by the water.
The ocean is just that way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hearing those windmills really make an eerie sound.
This noise, this feeling of vastness is comforting for them. An almost heterogeneous sound.
Web sleuth Peter Brent believes serial murderers sometimes pick kill sites and dumping grounds, partly because of sound.
That's so strong that serial killers who got caught actually wrote about it. They tried to describe them. You have it in dozens, if not hundreds of cases, a similar setup. It's like wind over the forest. It's like waves rolling on a beach.
And here in Atlantic City was at the spiraling churn of the windmills.
It's a perpetual sound that is not the same all the time, but almost the same. It adds to this feeling of vastness.
While we may have found an unexpected pattern, there was something that still bothered us. Why would the killer murder these women here, then risk driving to the Golden Key? Did he hope when the bodies were found, police would suspect someone at the motel, like Terry Olson? Or was there something about the trash-strewn ditch that fueled the fantasy of dominance, as Kelly surmised? Or were these women really killed in room 101 and a ditch just out the back door, the most convenient dumping ground? Until the eastbound strangler is caught, we won't have any answers. But how can we ever expect to find the killer? Unless we keep publicly talking about this case, as we are now. But thankfully, there was someone willing to speak publicly, a former Egg Harbor police captain named John DeAngelis, who had insider knowledge of the case before retiring in 2006.
The bodies were found in November, and at the end of that calendar year, they put a deal on the table to guys that had enough time in the retirement system, like if they got something like a deal they couldn't refuse. So as a result of that, a lot of these experienced guys that were assigned to like the fight, they knew all the players, all the people, they were leaving. And the prosecutor really made a tremendous technical error by not using the expertise and expert opinions of some of these guys that have been around in that world for decades.
But why wouldn't he? I mean, he wants the case cleared off his books like anybody else.
Well, my friend, you're asking me a $64,000 question that to this day I can't answer. Why would he do a lot of things? I cannot believe, especially in my police department, that we can't have closure to this. It's unacceptable to me. It's unbelievable. Time is marching on, and all the people, all the places, they're no longer there. So those people are long gone.
Learning what we had about Atlantic City, it seems what hindered this case from getting solved outside of the killer himself was the quagmire of big business and politics, and 4 women who were too easy to ignore. Now with each passing day, the chance to find out what really happened here was slipping away, and with it, any possible connection to Long Island. Which is why Rachel and I decided to go back to Web Sleuths to see if there was anything we might have missed. And as it turns out, there was.
So this is right after the killings in Atlantic City. I wonder if this is the guy that was hanging in Daytona murdering. Do you think that the Daytona serial killer moved north? From what I heard, he was never caught. He was killing prostitutes also. Sometimes they travel around.
We had found numerous posts about a series of murders in Daytona Beach, Florida, that look strangely similar to those in both Atlantic City and Long Island.
This is why I think the killer is a commercial fisherman from Long Island who migrates up and down the East Coast.
The timeline works out quite well for it to be the same person.
Some web sleuthers were suggesting the killer was a snowbird who moved up and down the coast with the change in seasons. To us, it seemed like a stretch.
And what makes you think, again, the fact that these are connected?
It's definitely the victim profile.
There's 4 victims in each case.
They were both sex workers, women involved in drugs on the margins of society.
Does the timeline work for Long Island?
It does.
Atlantic City and Daytona Beach, those are tourist towns.
It's a beachfront transient community.
I do know that law enforcement from Atlantic City did contact Daytona Beach.
Do you know if anything came of that?
I sure would like to know.
We even called back DeAngelis to confirm this was a lead the police followed up on as well.
They actually sent investigators to Daytona, but I really don't know the outcome of that. That was long after I retired.
But the police went to Daytona.
Yeah.
Trying to separate fact from fiction, we were faced with a terrifying scenario. Were we looking for an elusive seasonal killer who was murdering sex workers up and down the East Coast? Or just as frightening, 12 victims, all struggling to get by, murdered by different serial killers, and all their cases still unsolved. To find our answer, Rachel and I would have to head south to Daytona Beach. In February of 2006, Daytona was on lockdown after 3 women had been killed over 3 consecutive months.
Daytona Beach, Florida turns a hunting ground for a serial killer.
Somebody laying there in the woods.
And everyone was waiting for when the killer would strike again. However, unlike law enforcement in other cities, Daytona Beach's chief of police, Mike Chitwood, was willing to speak with us. Law enforcement in Long Island and Atlantic City have been extremely tight-lipped about their unsolved serial killer cases, but you're not. Why is that?
If you don't make the community aware, the community doesn't know what to look out for. And 99% of the crimes that we solve, it's the person picking up the phone saying, Daytona Beach Police Department, this is what I saw. That's how we solve our crimes. And that's how I believe we're going to solve the serial killer.
Do you remember Atlantic City calling you?
We had our cold case squad call Atlantic City. Hey, what do you got? DNA-wise, same thing with Long Island. What do you have? What are you looking at? Trying to compare notes.
But were Daytona's murders really connected to the other killings we were looking at? To find our answer, Rachel and I would have to go back to the beginning. Our story begins on December 26th, when the body of Laquita Mae Gunther, age 45, was found stuffed between two buildings. Laquita had been shot in the back of the head and was wearing only socks. 3 weeks later, on January 14th, Julianne Green, age 34, was found on a construction access road. She too was naked and had been shot in the back of the head. Then on February 24th, Awana Patton, age 35, was discovered off a dirt road. Like the other two victims, she too had been shot in the head, and like Laquita, was wearing only socks. 3 women killed approximately 3 weeks apart in 3 consecutive months, and everyone was waiting for March. Except March in Daytona typically meant one thing: spring break.
Daytona Beach, a popular destination for college students on their spring break. But this year, there's a bit more to worry about there than a bad case of sunburn. A serial killer is on the loose in the Daytona area.
A rapist who likes to commit murder, that is not a good thing for any community, and that's why the police are really, really concerned that this guy may in fact strike again.
But some news outlets were more interested in stoking the public's fear than giving the real details of the crime.
They don't show the victims at all.
If I watched that not knowing anything, I was like, they're killing college co-eds.
I can't believe that. That was ridiculous. When you don't show the victims, how are you going to solve the crime? The real victims in this case were Laquita Mae Gunther, Julie Green, and Awana Patton. And while they might not have been fresh-faced co-eds, that doesn't mean they deserve justice any less.
They probably thought these 3 women personify what's not pretty about Daytona Beach, which is 3 prostitutes. It's a shame that they didn't show their pictures. Those are the people that, lived in the city, and that they were the ones that got murdered.
In their attempts to catch the Daytona Beach killer, police would bring in Florida's lone profiler, Tom Davis.
The original profile that I gave to the police was likely going to be a white male, at least in his 30s, probably not more than 45 chance of above average intelligence, and also has propensities towards fetishes. He was on a mission. He had to act out. He couldn't not act out.
With killings in December, January, and February, the pattern was clear and the date had been set. This calendar killer was ready to strike in March. And as the days approached, panic soon set in.
I carry switchblades in the house. Everybody else does too.
We're just letting you know about the serial murders in the area. Stay in lighted areas. Get off the street if they can.
Okay, we're going to get another girl killed in March, for sure. No doubt about it.
Finally, March arrived, and the Daytona Beach serial killer didn't strike. The pundits and the profilers, thankfully, were wrong. Or so it seemed.
Josh and I are in Daytona to see whether a set of murders here are part of something far more sinister.
It may very well be that he went up the coast or down the coast or inland or some other place and claimed a victim or two that we don't know about.
A trail of killings that some believe stretched from New York to Florida.
It's not like Long Island. We're not dealing with like escorts.
No.
We're not dealing with Atlantic City-like streetwalkers.
Yeah. These seem to be women who are just trying to get by in whatever way they can.
All right, so the question is what do we know about these three women?
Gunther was shot in the back of the head. Julie was shot in the back of the head. Ilana probably put up a fight because she was shot in the front of the head.
Right, pretty much the same gun used and all, right?
Yeah, it was
a 40 caliber.
40 caliber Smith & Wesson Sigma Series VE.
They all knew each other.
Gunther and Green were former roommates as well.
If they all knew each other, it doesn't seem like it would be a serial killer.
Right.
But 3 women, 3 months, 3 weeks apart. That timeline is very much a kind of serial killer timeline. Which one is it? I think we have to look at who they knew. Who they all knew.
If this was the same killer, then why did his signature change to shootings? While some experts have told us serial killers don't change their signatures, others have said they'll do whatever it takes to keep on killing, much like the Grim Sleeper, the Hillside Strangler, and Ted Bundy. But there was something else Josh and I had yet to address, a mysterious episode that occurred 2 years later, one that would throw this whole case into question.
I remember it well. I was getting ready to go on a vacation when the phone rang in the middle of the night and said, hey, we have a naked female in a field with a gunshot wound to the face. The son of a bitch is back.
It would seem there was a fourth victim in this case, and her name is Stacey Gage.
What leads you to believe that she is part of your three? She fits the profile of our 3 previous victims. She was an occasional prostitute, led a high-risk lifestyle, and she was found naked in a field with only socks on, and she suffered a gunshot wound to the face.
The last known images we have of Stacey Gage are from this surveillance footage, taken on December 10th, 2007, as she entered a public supermarket, just hours before she was killed. Stacey had left her home located just 2 miles away in her grandmother's white van, saying she was going out to get ice. At the time, Stacey would leave behind 2 children, an 8-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter.
Which house is Betty Hill in?
That one.
Oh, that one. Both hands. I got it. She's not home.
And who are her daughters?
Oh, hey. I'm Josh. How are you?
Hi, I'm
That's
Rachel. Hi. Nice to meet you.
We're trying to look at the case, but your grandmother didn't want to speak to us because the way in which the press had portrayed your mom before.
She doesn't want to speak to press at all.
Right, right.
Because when it first happened, we actually had to be police escorted out of our houses because it was so bad.
Wow, was that bad?
Yes. I've always thought about looking into it. That's now I'm 18.
Yeah.
So now I want more answers.
Mm-hmm.
And if you guys want to help me look into it, I'll help you.
Of course.
I've always wanted to look into it because I would never do anything as a kid.
So tomorrow we'll pick you up.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Well, thanks very much. Have a good one.
We'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Josh and I now had another reason for being in Daytona. Her name is Alyssa, and she was just 10 years old when her mother was taken from her, and she needed our help to find answers. It would seem with Stacey's killing, we were now dealing with 4 murders in Daytona, just like the 4 in Atlantic City and the 4 in Long Island. And if somehow these killings were connected, then we might just have the only clue that could solve them all.
Every single night when he lays his head down, he's got to be wondering if the SWAT team's coming through the door. Because I got one thing that he can never change, and that's his DNA.
Next time on the killing season.
Florida's seek more bodies.